that we weren't there. You can see the force of the wind, the insulation, the chairs in the trees, the devastation behind it as you start to move down into the rhododendron alley. You see just the wind, some of the windows that are crashed to the ground, but that building is gone, and you see kind of that force of the wind and trees. There were also chairs that were literally almost all the way up to Route 83. Probably what, a quarter mile away, that were in the trees from that building. And the kind of iconic looks to it as you think about what wind actually does. As you move into the forested area behind the rhododendron alley, here is what it looked like on the Friday after the tornado. Here is what it looks like a week later. Basically, this is an area which is kind of a very wonderful thing that happened with Dan Herms here, the associate chair in the entomology department and a wonderful horticulturalist. And he really, when he arrived kind of the next day to talk to Ken, he had been overseas, really talked to Ken about, this will be an area where we can really study. We're an educational institution. Wind is a natural force. Here's where we can study forest regeneration and how things will come back. So, there's going to be wonderful educational opportunities. And as hard as this is to look at and to think through all those large trees that many were not there until Edmund Secrest forested this area decades upon decades upon decades ago. He came upon barren fields, and now these areas will be a real reforestation area, and it'll be very interesting to study. An Ohio buckeye in the foreground looking back to what was devastated behind it. So, some tough sights and things that we do need to mourn, but which we do need to realize what's going to come next. You look down to the John Streeter Amphitheater, which is just a wonderful, wonderful place. Again, been there a couple years, seems to people like it's been here for decades. A wonderful place where all kinds of programming is done, horticulturally, music programs, a lot of different art in the Arboretum, and that amphitheater area that you see down in that valley, you can see how that was impacted. Here we have this tremendous effort and tremendous concern and support. President Gee is there in the center of this picture. Steve Slack to the we go all the way around the corner here. So let's start with Bill Ravlin in the black shirt and red hat. Behind him, kind of making a point, is Bobby Mosier. Bill Ravlin here, an associate director of OARDC. Bobby Mosier, the dean of the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences, who was up here day after day after day until he had to get down to Farm Science Review in Columbus. President Gordon Gee of Ohio State University. Steve Slack, who is looking out onto the valley. And then to the far right, Ken Cochran, the program director for Secrest Arboretum, just looking at it and thinking about what's next, trying to pull together the ideas of what happened. And President Gee was very engaged, and he was really trying to figure out, how did this wind go and what happened here, and just all the support that's going to occur. One of the favorite areas for a lot of people in the Arboretum, and from students from ATI coming up, a big grove of umbrella magnolias that were just magnificent. 40, 50 feet tall, a wonderful area, the canopy under which, and you don't see them down there because they were flattened. The White Pine Archway, a place that is a big deal. These were two weeping white pines that kind of made an archway. A lot of weddings were held there, and I have to admit that one of the things that we like to do in the Arboretum with groups that were on walks is we would make them all go through, and when all had gone through from one side of the archway to the other, we said, "You are now all wedded in the eyes of Secrest Arboretum." So we have some separations for a while. There aren't going to be any divorces. This is going to come back, and this is going to be part of the Arboretum again. But that was another one that was hard to see. The farm shop, and you see just the chaos of wind roaring into this, and that is an area that as you start moving out into the Arboretum, and then you see in the background there, back toward the OARDC campus, the shredding of leaves on trees. I mean, it was almost stranger in some ways than the uprooting of trees. You just see trees that did make it, but the wind was shredding the leaves on those. That's not insect damage, it's shredding of leaves. Again, the powerful nature of wind that roared through here on 9/16, and a picture here on 9/17. The Kristen Jackson overview, a wonderful place honoring the tragic death of Kristen Jackson years ago. here it is kind of around that same fair time of that tragedy where you're seeing kind of what it looked like right after, this is an area that, this was sad. It was sad. We have to accept there was a lot of sadness. Is this area was selected because it was such a beautiful look out into the Arboretum. But it will truly be an area of rebirth and regrowth. But it was tough to look at first, and you see that area as you look out into that valley where there was damage was occurring. The uprooting of trees was just remarkable, the force that could do such a thing. The Secrest forest plots, some of those earlier areas that really were the early forest plots. It's moved into a landscape arboretum in recent years, but here's the Secrest forest and kind of a lot of damage that's occurred there. But again, there is this wonderful grove of arborvitaes, destruction all around them, the Don Redwood grove off to the right or the south of that. But it lives and was really not damaged, even though there's tremendous damage to the north and south, and behind it to the west, to the east of this. So it's an amazing thing that some of the things that happened. We found trees that were stressed, and that was this was in an area that suffered little damage, which was the shade tree plot. And certainly the tornado didn't come through this area, but high winds did. And so you notice here there had been a lot of decay in this tree. Already was showing premature fall coloration. So some of those trees suffered from the lesser wind because of structural problems that they already had. The same thing on this majestic silver linden that we saw kind of what was going on with its root system only once it was uprooted. But this was a magnificent tree. The Ag Engineering building on the OARDC campus, the building that was just devastated by this tornado as it swung through the campus, and you can see just the chaotic damage that occurred there. This picture, the power of wind, you can just imagine the wind blowing through here and blowing on out toward the Arboretum past this crabapple. And again, the damage behind this crabapple and the metal that it was, that was flying along and hit at the base. But again, the Phenology Pavilion, the Discovery Pavilion, the Nielsen Herms Pavilion, this wonderful new building in the Arboretum, there it is, intact. Not everything was, and so there's people that there's special benches and special places here, and those people. People are calling and people are wanting to come in, and it's hard to control. The access still is a very controlled access, but there will be people that come to mourn things that meant a great deal to them. But again, benches to rebuild. It's a rebuilding effort, even though there are some stark reminders of the damage the wind did. And here we see a couple of shadows of people looking at this uprooted crabapple. The crabapples along the road, which is just a big, big deal in the spring with people loving to see those blooms. Probably 2/3 to 3/4 of those are gone. So we need to look at what's next for those areas. But here they are, and we're kind of taking a look at them in shadowed here. These oaks behind the stone house, that we'll see a few more pictures later, and just how they were just like a little. Just laying there on the ground, completely uprooted. Just kind of, at some point, you just want this to stop. You can't look at it anymore. But there was tremendous damage. But then you see this wonderful OARDC begonias. Lower living things were not as affected by this storm. And this was an area of campus, the old administration area, and these OARDC, these iconic OARDC begonias that are there each year in scarlet and gray, and there they are. Showing the light at the end of this tunnel. This was kind of an iconic red car too. I mean, it was in all the news photo of them. So there were a few vehicles that were trashed by the storm. Okay, we're really looking now at Saturday, the 18th of September. Cleanup is really beginning in earnest. We're seeing tremendous machines coming in to chip up some of this material. And again, Bobby Mosier and Steve Slack are really on the site again, looking at the, what needs to be done here as they're trying to see if there can be, federal disaster or state disaster aid coming in, and trying to think of all the things that need to be done. Here, Governor Strickland has arrived, and he is going to be touring the site. There's helicopters and planes going on overhead that are, checking out with aerial views of what kind of damage that we're seeing here. Here later on in that day, Bobby Mosier and Carol Whitaker is the Vice President of OSU for Research. Bobby Mosier, the Dean of the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. And Dan Herms is on the scene. And such a crucial presence Dan was to really work with Ken on seeing the big long-term picture and the things that we can make from this. I mean, he was hurt by loss of very familiar trees. He was here as a graduate student. He's here now as the associate chair in entomology and a true superstar of extension and research. But they're looking at this and kind of thinking about what comes next. Always interesting to see things, graduate student trees in their tree nursery. Not few of them overturned, but there they stood while large 42-inch diameter pin oaks were down right next to them. So always interesting to see that, but always a reminder, that can be a devastating thing. I mean, a graduate student, and there is their research. I mean, this, the fact that these greenhouses were just mashed, and the kind of research and the unique germplasm in some of these greenhouses is really an aspect on the OARDC campus that is hard to take, but it's an amazing to see how cleanup is proceeding and people are getting back into the process. Again, that ag engineering building, major damage. You look for different things in here, and a lot of people have made fun of of some people thinking this is kind of an interesting thing. But there we have the Adolgo crabapple that was lost, and all that's left is this little shard. But it kind of looks like a Roy Lichtenstein sculpture, doesn't it? So there's beauty in strange